I'm going to keep this up for a second because I just want you to take notice here that I have he, him right next to my name. And you might have seen more people sharing their pronouns recently. It's a way to say that, hey, I might have a man's name, I might look like a man, but this is giving you permission to refer to me as a man. And it's also in solidarity with those people who might identify with a gender that's different than the one that they present as. And we're going to get into all of this. The goal of this is not to make you all woke. The goal of this is not to understand everything about the LGBT community. It's how do you create that welcoming, that warm, that safe environment for the people you support to feel comfortable talking about their identity and living their true lives. It is not a single issue struggle, and I love this quote from Audre Lorde, because we don't live single issue lives. So people with disabilities are also facing their sexuality, they're also facing a whole bunch of other realities. They also have a bunch of different identities, and we'll get into all of that. I do have to share before I go forward that I am a gay man. I think that's worth saying because I don't necessarily understand the experiences that others in the LGBT community have. My trans friends face a whole different amount of prejudice and a whole different set of expectations from society than I do. So I don't know who I'm speaking to today. If there's someone who is more personally experienced in anything that I'm talking about, I hope I do justice to that experience as well. But it's just really an understanding of how we can create this safe space. Promise that's the last rainbow in your face you're gonna get for this presentation. All right, so what is a safe space, you might ask? It's a welcoming and a supportive place for LGBTQ individuals. I put the plus there because, as you know, there's a lot of letters that keep being added to that acronym. I think maybe 10 years ago it was LGBT, and we said, okay, that covers everything, right? Boy, were we wrong. There are so many different identities that fall outside of the cisgendered, straight expectation that we always had. Cisgendered, for anyone, and I didn't know this term until a couple years ago, cisgendered means that you identify with that gender you were assigned as birth. So if you hear me use that term, that's what I mean. So since I was born a man and I identify as a man, I consider myself a cisgender man. But it's an open-minded and forgiving space for all, because just like I have to learn about what it's like for my trans friends, my non-binary friends, I'm not going to understand everything about their life. I'm not going to understand how they got there. I'm not going to understand the daily experiences that they have, but I need to learn how to accept and be the best person I can be that's going to validate their identity. When someone hears the right pronouns and someone is treated as the person that they want to be, that's when they really feel like they're seen and they feel like they can be their full true selves, which is something that we want the people we support to feel, and it's something that we want our coworkers to feel, and the people that we're supervising as well. Again, it's not something we have to understand, we just have to accept. And it's not exclusive for just LGBT people, but it is explicitly saying, look, this is a safe space where if you are part of the LGBTQ plus community, you can talk about that and you can be comfortable being your true self in this environment. Group homes should be safe spaces, and I'm gonna try to keep our minds off of COVID for a little while, but during this time, people are stuck with people that might not necessarily recognize some of their identities. They might not recognize that they're part of a certain community. And they might have to hide a certain part of themselves during this time when they're isolated. So it's more important now more than ever to have that safe space, especially in the home, but in the workplace and in the day programs as well. All right, so there's some funny words in here if you look too closely, but LGBT people are not just that community. They are part of many different communities as well. They're part of their religious communities. They're part of their political communities. And not every LGBT person is a Democrat, even though you know, maybe one party does favor more acceptance than the other. That's not a broad brush for everybody. Some are from different religions, you know, Christian, from different backgrounds. Some are able-bodied and some have disabilities. And I've done a lot of work in the last couple of years with people with disabilities who identify as part of the LGBTQ plus community. And it's really tough because they're in the margins of two places. They don't necessarily fit in with the able-bodied LGBT community, but they also don't necessarily feel like they fit in with the disability community, because how many other people do they know with disabilities that are also part of the LGBT community? So it's a difficult and lonely place for some people, especially when they're in those marginalized communities. And we're gonna learn a little bit more about how to be an ally in just a little bit. This is just some of the letters that are part of it. And again, there's more letters being added frequently. Why? Because it's not the same experience for everybody. As a white gay man, my day-to-day life, the prejudices that I face, society's acceptance of my true identity is far different than a trans person's would be. There is privilege that applies to certain classes of people that don't apply to others, and we're not going to get too deep into that, I promise. But it's important that we're aware of the different experiences that people face. So maybe, and I'm not going to read through all these, but I encourage you to, maybe you do support someone who identifies as pansexual. They might not automatically fit in and click in with lesbians because they're a girl who likes girls. Maybe if they're pansexual, they need to meet other pansexual people to understand that, okay, what I'm feeling, what I'm experiencing isn't weird, it isn't different. There are others who are like me and others who get me. So when you're supporting someone who isn't part of this community, throwing a pride flag on them and sending them off to the parade might not necessarily give them that feeling of community, because they're still experiencing a different life for themselves, and then different expectations from others in the community. If you want to connect with me afterwards, I'll put my email up and I can send this graphic out. I think it's been incredibly helpful for me and for some of my coworkers to understand. And that's why I always say LGBTQ plus or LGBT plus. It's more convenient for typing, it's more recognizable, the LGBT, and then the plus is saying that yes, we recognize those other identities as well. I love this graphic, and if you go to pbs.org and look up the gender map, that's all I had to do in Google, just Google PBS gender map, you will see all these other gender identities that are recognized in other countries, including here in America. So Native Americans have long believed in two-spirit people, you know, people who sometimes are identifying more masculine, sometimes more feminine. All over the world, we have this mixture of genders that isn't just that binary man or woman, gay or straight that we tend to think of. Humans really want to put things into simple boxes that we can understand. And when we do that, sometimes we're completely erasing or forgetting about all these other kinds of identities and all these other kinds of people. So yes, we want to be binary because it makes sense in our minds. We can understand it a little more, but again, we're not going to understand. We just have to accept it. We just have to be open-minded, and we have to help people be proud of who they are. All these different cultures, though, have recognized different genders and different variations. Our culture has too. Anyone remembers David Bowie? He was kind of androgynous with genders. Prince was kind of androgynous as well. So there's different components to sex, gender, and sexuality. It's not just your parts. It's not just who you like. It is also the psychological knowledge of our gender. So how do you identify? Are you more masculine? Are you more feminine? There's our gender expression, how we tell others our gender using our commonly understood cultural and social cues. So I identify as a man and I don't wear a dress. That's why, because society says if you're a man, you don't wear a dress, etc. But if I identified something differently, you know, I would express that by the clothes that I wear. Orientation is who we're attracted to sexually or romantically, and then the sexual behaviors is what occurs in the bedroom. So it's important, and we don't have to understand this completely, but it's important just to understand that gender identity and gender expression are very different. Someone might dress a certain way, but might identify differently. So we can't always make assumptions, and we'll talk a little bit more about what we can do instead of assuming, but we can't always just go ahead and assume something based off of what we see. I was joking with a friend the other day that I'm just gonna put this up and sit for the rest of my presentation because I think that this explains it so nicely, all these different components that go behind who we are. So yeah, it's really hard to fit into that binary male, female, gay, or straight. This is also something that you could look up easily, Google gender unicorn, and you can get your own copy of this. All right, so what do we do as a DSP? What do we do as a frontline supervisor? What do we do as someone who wants to be open and inclusive and accepting? We want to be an ally. No way that any civil rights fight has ever been won without the help of an ally. They're the ones who build the bridges of communication between straight, cisgender people and the LGBTQ community. They help to validate the importance of the fight, and they're also good role models to others to pave the way to get them on board. I can't remember who said this quote, but when you stand in the margins, that's when you erase them. So that's when you're coming towards that marginalized community and know you're not part of them, but you're meeting them there and you're saying, okay, how can we include you? How can we make this world a better place for you? So Francesca, lost her last name here. Francesca Lee has a wonderful video about being an ally. So I'm gonna play that for you right now. It's just a couple of minutes.
Hey friends, so I'm trying something different with my setup and I don't know if it's working, but you will deal. Imagine your friend is building a house and they...
I'm sorry about that.
Hey friends, so I'm trying something different with my setup and I don't know if it's working, but you will deal. Imagine your friend is building a house and they ask you to help, but you've never built a house before. So it'd probably be a good idea for you to put on some protective gear and listen to the person in charge. Otherwise, someone's gonna get seriously hurt. Look, I'm helping! It's the exact same idea when it comes to being an ally. An ally is a person that wants to fight for the equality of a marginalized group that they're not a part of. We need your help building this house, but you probably should listen so you know what to do first. Let's do this. So here are my 5 tips for being a good ally. Understand your privilege. Now, a lot of people get hung up on the word privilege, so let me break it down for you nice and easy. Privilege does not mean that you are rich, that you have an easy life, that everything's been handed to you and you've never had to struggle or work hard. All it means is that there are some things in life that you will not experience or ever have to think about just because of who you are. It's kind of like those horses that have those blinders on. They can see just fine. There's just a whole bunch of stuff on the side that they don't even know exists. So for example, there are currently 29 states where you can legally be fired for being gay, and there are 34 states where you can legally be fired for being trans. Now, as a straight cis woman, those are things that I don't have to ever think about if I don't want to. I'm not going to be fired because I'm straight, and I'm not going to be fired because I'm cis. So it makes sense that before I can fight for the rights of others, I have to understand what rights I have and others don't. That's privilege. Listen and do your homework. It sounds like a no-brainer, but it's not possible for you to learn if you aren't willing to listen. So you got to know when to zip up the lip up. I don't know. You get what I mean. But that's the thing that's so cool about social media. There are so many people sharing their stories all around the world and connecting with people that they normally would never get a chance to without the power of the internet. So do your homework. Start reading blogs, tweets, news articles, and stories so that you can get caught up on the issues that are important to the communities that you want to support. Speak up. But not over. If the Fight for Equality was a girl group, the ally wouldn't be the lead singer or the second lead singer. They'd be Michelle. An ally's job is to support. You want to make sure that you use your privilege and your voice to educate others, but make sure to do it in such a way that does not speak over the community members that you're trying to support or take credit for things that they are already saying. This isn't Mario Kart. Stay in your lane. Realize that you're going to make mistakes and apologize when you do. Nobody's perfect. Unlearning problematic things takes time and work, so you are bound to mess up and trip and fall. But don't worry, you can brush yourself off and get right back up. And back up! Just remember that it's not about your intent, it's about your impact. So when you get called out, make sure to listen, apologize, commit to changing your behavior, and move forward. Last, but certainly not least, actually the most important thing on this list is remember that ally is a verb. Saying you're an ally is not enough. You gotta do the work. 1 through 4. 1 through 4. As always, there are links in the video description box, some of the things I mentioned in this video, along with some resources that have been really helpful for me as I've gone along in my journey to be more conscious. So I want to hear from you.
All right, so you can check out some more of the material that she has. There's also a wonderful video called Sometimes You're a Caterpillar. Go ahead and write that down, called Sometimes You're a Caterpillar. And it kind of helps explain privilege in a concrete and non-offensive way. So go ahead and check that out in your own time. All right, and I'm sorry that I paused it there in the beginning. I'm learning what screen sharing is all about. So just to recap, being an ally is not the same as being part of the group. While we appreciate the support of allies, while we need the support of allies, you still have a different day-to-day life than the community that you're supporting, and you have to recognize that. Just because you got to help build a house doesn't mean that it becomes your house. That doesn't mean that you take that movement away, that you say what's important to you. And this is something that kind of works out with the disability community as well. When we're supporting them and advocating for themselves, we're doing what they want. We are not, and it's hard sometimes because we're great people who really want to do good things, but we're not going to jump in and do what we know is best for them. We're going to make sure that they're the ones guiding that decision and that they are taking that path, and we're going to help them get down the path that's most important to them, not necessarily what's most important to us. Something I've learned with advocacy quite a bit, and I get knocked down on it quite a bit too, because it's like, okay, wait, no. What I think is going to be important to this community is not at all what they experience on a day-to-day basis. So we have to always listen to that community. Make sure that your allyship is still centered around the person, their journey as an individual of the LGBTQ plus community, and think, how do you empower and how do you support? I gotta write down my names for these quotes, but be my microphone, not my voice. Someone said that, it's great, I always use it. Thank you for that. Be a microphone, but not a voice. Don't take over, just help the person amplify the cause. All right, so I'm gonna share some tips for creating a safe space. Again, I'm gonna try not to get too much in the weeds. These are just easy things that we can do, things that we can recognize that might be helpful in having a more inclusive space for the LGBT community. So mirror the terms that people use for themselves and their loved ones. Don't just label or assume that the next person will prefer the same terms. Similar to, and you'll talk more about, I'm looking forward to the presentation later about person-centered language. Similar to that, there's been a lot of offensive terms and a lot of changing terms that have been used to describe the LGBT community. It's important that we are listening to how people describe themselves, and we're not just calling them whatever we were taught to call that group of people. So listening and using the terms that they use. Some people in the gay community like the term queer. They think that it is more inclusive of more than just men who like men. It also recognizes other aspects of themselves. Other people don't like the word queer because that was used as an insult for a long time. It's one of those words that the community's taken back. So don't go around putting that word on people if you don't know how it's going to impact people. And just because one person that you know goes by that label, goes by that title, doesn't mean that the next person is also going to be that way as well. We can have conversations. I mean, if we're really hung up and we're like, okay, maybe we're starting a conversation, maybe this person is not immediately sharing these things, maybe they don't feel comfortable sharing these things. You know, I mean to be respectful. Please forgive me if I use the wrong term and feel free to educate me. Our tone is just as important as our words. When we speak from the heart, our message is clear, even when we get the words wrong. People aren't going to remember what you said. They're going to remember the intent behind it. And that's what's going to make a big difference. That's what's going to keep someone from feeling completely alienated and from feeling like you're really making an effort to include them. All right, try to ungender. Microsoft Word doesn't like that word for some reason, but try to ungender your language as much as possible. We have, and the English language is better than some of the Latin languages that really put masculine and feminine terms, you know, they put those connotations on a different term. So we have those baked into our language too. And it's something just to be aware of. I can't tell you how many, I'm currently a student right now. I can't tell you how many of my social work textbooks are telling me that they say his or her. And it's, I feel like you could just save so many words if you don't even say his or her. Just say there. And we hear about that pronoun a lot nowadays. They, them, ze, zir. There's other pronouns that are not just he or she. Those are people who do not identify as a male or a female. They identify as something else. They don't feel like they are themselves if you're calling them a different gender. They're often uncomfortable. That might be an uncomfortable experience to hear those things sometimes. So just being as neutral as possible with your language whenever you can or when you're not sure. So referring to somebody's husband or wife as their spouse or significant other until you hear them say it. Again, go back to number one, mirror what people are saying, but as a general term, don't just go ahead and call any man you see sir. My mom taught me a long time ago, don't say man because you don't want to age the poor woman. So I don't use that term anyway, but it is common. Or ladies and gentlemen, you know, the word folks can be used in that place. The word folks with an X is actually something that I'm seeing more with the non-binary community. They appreciate that term because that's really more inclusive. Say everybody, say somebody. And it's really hard to talk about my friend Lewis, who doesn't go by he, him pronouns, he goes by their pronouns. Right there in that sentence, he. It comes out so easily. You have to really make an effort sometimes to say they or them. It's in our language, you know, if we were in a room and you guys all went to go get bagels after the presentation and I had a cell phone here, I'd be like, oh, somebody left their cell phone, because I don't know the gender of, you know, I'm not gonna say somebody left his or her cell phone. So we do already have that in our language. It's just a matter of being conscious of it and trying to use those terms. When somebody does identify by they or them or by a different pronoun than he or she or by a different pronoun than what we think they identify as, we have to make that extra effort and change our language accordingly. Is that gonna be easy? It's not gonna be easy. You're gonna mess up. When you do mess up, and I think this is on my next thing, when you mess up, forgive yourself and offer a sincere apology if you make a mistake, but do the work to get it right next time. Pretend that you just bumped into somebody in the hallway, you know. You're not gonna be like, oh my God, I'm so sorry I bumped into you. It ruined my day. I'm trying so hard to walk around slower. Oh my gosh, I always do this. Oh, I'm so sorry. You don't make a scene about that, right? You just say, I'm sorry, and you move on and you don't do it again. So forgive yourself, offer sincere apology, but move on, and do the work to get it right next time. Let me go back to these other things here. So if you think your question might be too personal, That's something that comes across sometimes. You know, what can I ask? Well, think about what would you ask anybody else? So would you ask a straight person or a straight couple, okay, which one of you cuts the grass and which one of you cooks dinner? Which one of you is the man and which one of you is the woman? Again, we have that binary thinking. We want to put people into a box and okay, this is how it makes sense to us. That's not something we would ask a straight couple though. So don't ask a gay couple, hey, which one of you cooks dinner and which one of you fixes the car? You don't ask your cisgender friends what kind of equipment they had or if they had the surgery or not, right? We're not going to just ask those things. That's weird. That's personal. We don't want to do that. So don't do that to an LGBTQ person. Whatever your curiosity might inquire you to do, let them share that, let them be that story that they tell. If you need to know someone's name and pronoun, you should create a system where you're asking everyone these questions, not just singling people out. Again, putting that in your email signature right next to your name, you know, in parentheses, he/him, or whatever pronouns you identify by. Sometimes maybe when you do introductions, when you're meeting someone for the first time, with people we support, sometimes this is just education and we can just have this conversation maybe for the first time. Try to remove outdated terminology from your vocabulary. Again, something that will be reinforced with person-centered language. They can cause offense. Language is always changing, so it's important to kind of check in and make sure that the words that you're using are still communicating respect. So we've seen terms such as transsexual, transvestite, homosexual. They've been kind of replaced with more inclusive and more respectful terms. So just try to be mindful of some of the terms that you are using. Always use the correct name and pronoun when referring to someone, even if it doesn't match their legal name. This includes in talking about their past. So I hear this a lot in media. I'm going to use Caitlyn Jenner as an example because we all know who she is, or most of us probably know who she is. When we talk about her Olympic career in the 1970s, we often refer to Bruce. We refer to the masculine figure we saw in a box of Wheaties. We don't see, when we do that, we don't see that Bruce was always Caitlyn. We're not recognizing the fact that this was something that they always truly were. So in the past, we're not going to refer to as when Karen was Jeff. You know, we're going to refer to Karen as Karen. Karen has been Karen her whole life. It is just now she's truly living as that. So, you know, now Caitlyn Jenner is truly living as Caitlyn Jenner. So when we're discussing her Olympic record, we're referring to her as Caitlyn, not Bruce, even though at the time it was a different name. So always use the correct name and pronoun based off of where they are at. And that includes in talking about the past. Already went over this, but again, we know you're trying. Don't make a big scene if you mess up, but definitely do the work. Make sure you don't make that mistake again. This next one's important, and especially with people we support. I've probably done this before. I've probably shared TMI about someone I'm supporting and might have said something that they didn't necessarily want me to say. Maybe with good intention, but maybe, you know, hey, I didn't want them to know that. So try not to accidentally out people. Let them be the ones that share their own story. They will tell others if and when they choose to do so. So when someone comes to you and they you know, come out to you, or they want to be referred to, or they say that they're transgender, they want to be referred to by a different pronoun, this is not something that we're just going to run to the phone and call mom and make sure mom knows, and we're going to have a big team meeting about it. No, we're going to include that person and we're going to let them drive that process, and we're going to see what we can do to support them. Remember that this isn't a bedroom issue. Our job is not to be like, I don't want to hear about that. That's your personal life. That's your love life. You know, you got your 12 hours of community time and I don't want to hear about it. No, if they're talking to you about this, this is something that's really impacting their lives. This is something that affects their day-to-day experience. All right, almost wrapping up, and then I want to see questions because I know that there's chats coming up, but I'm sharing the screen so I can't look just yet. So how do I support someone who is coming out? It's an ongoing process. It's a process of self-awareness, and it's different for every person. It's not going to be the same. You know, I saw an interesting interview the other day with Anderson Cooper and Tim Cook, and they said, you know what, we didn't want that Ellen DeGeneres moment where our face was plastered on every magazine saying I'm gay. We wanted to find a different way to come out. So it's a different experience for everybody, and that needs to be driven by what they're comfortable with. So be respectful of the person and their privacy. Please do not out them to people that they are not out to. That could really cause some damage to them psychologically. All right, I'm not going to get too in the weeds of this because I'm getting towards my time. But this is a model of 6 stages of coming out. This is not the same for everybody, but it kind of gives us an idea of what it's like. So the first step is confusion, when you kind of are wondering like, hey, this feels different. Like, is it okay if I'm gay? Is it okay if I'm transgender? Comparison is looking at other people with LGBTQ and identities in the media or in their lives. You know, there was a time where I was like, okay, am I Anderson Cooper or am I Elton John? You know, and you kind of compare to what you know. There's tolerance, and that's when you're admitting that you're LGBTQ to yourself, but you're still resistant to share that. So it takes a while just to even get to that phase where someone even accepts it themselves. Acceptance is when people feel that they're okay to actually share with others. So this is where we might come in with someone we're supporting. They're at that phase of acceptance where when they're ready to tell you. Pride is when people realize their identity is legitimate, they're out, proud, and visible. Synthesis is when it becomes part of their lives and all those feelings of loneliness, anger, and loss are in the past. And there's a lot of it for people who are undergoing transitions or who are coming out. It's not a linear process though. You don't start at 1 and go to 6 and you're a 6 for the rest of your life. You can progress quickly, you could skip stages. And you might regress based on your environment. So some people at work might do more to conceal their true identity than they do with their friends. Sometimes people are based on where they're going. So maybe if they're going to church, they're not going to necessarily feel as comfortable as they are with a group of friends. It's important to realize that the person is guiding this process and we need to meet them wherever they're at. They're the expert of their own lives. They know why they need to act a certain way around mom and then act a certain way at home. That's important to them, and that's something that we need to just follow their lead on. All right, let's look at some questions. And again, please don't be afraid to ask. We only learn from asking questions. This is a safe space, which means any question that you have, you can ask that. This is how we understand, this is how we learn. My email is up here if there's something that you don't want to share with everybody. So feel free to email me. I'm going to do a plug also for Prideability. So Prideability is an advocacy and social group for people with disabilities who are part of the LGBTQ community. They are all over New York State. They started in Long Island and they have made their way to the Western region. I'm part of the group in the Rochester region. There's one in the Capital region. And again, there's some downstate like in Long Island and Staten Island. So check them out as well. Maybe someone you support might find a sense of community with other LGBT people with disabilities. Again, they might feel like they're alone. So this gives them an opportunity to find others who have similar experiences.